no autographs. I have to get to the webinar. No one asked for my autograph, don't worry. Anyway, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for muting yourselves. And you can enable the closed captioning feature if you need to. We are recording, so this will be available for later. I believe those are all the housekeeping notes for now. So I'm very happy to introduce to you again my colleague and friend and my fellow homie from Los Angeles, California, Harold Morales. Harold is the community program specialist for the Alzheimer's Association Heart of America chapter, which some of you might know that I also worked for. So Harold and I are just following each other around, apparently. And so he's there now. Harold is a passionate public health professional. He has a Master of Public Health, Health Promotion, and Disease Prevention from California State University, Fullerton, and a bachelor's degree in agricultural biology from Cal State Polytechnical University in Pomona, California. And Harold, as part of my presentation I just finished doing, I talked about how we had to be innovative in thinking about support groups in rural areas, including a bunch of farmers who were not interested at all in going to a support group. And if I had known you at the time, I would have said, my friend Harold is an agricultural biologist, and farmers probably would be impressed by that. I'm impressed by it. So that being said, Harold is a real hero. He was with us about a little more than a year ago when he just started working at the Alzheimer's Association. And I'm so happy to invite him back. He knows everything he needs to know now, just 1 year in to his stint at the Alzheimer's Association. And Harold is here to talk with us about the 2024 Alzheimer's Association International Conference, which was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania this year. I never got to go to an international conference when I worked there, Harold, so you're winning. I will quit talking now and turn it over to Harold. Thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to hear about the conference.
Well, thank you so much for the invite, Kelly, and thank you for all the great words and accolades. I'm still learning, so I don't know half of the things that I should know. So definitely, it's a learning process. You'll be happy to know that in high school I was part of the Future Farmers of America. That's still even a thing. So yeah. So yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us. As Kelly mentioned, I did got lucky to go to the national conference, the international conference for Alzheimer's in Philadelphia, hosted by the Alzheimer's Association. It was a very extensive and very large conference. A lot of researchers, and most of them researchers, really smart people. A lot of the uh, talks is kind of when I was a little overwhelmed with all the research going on. So that's what I'm hoping to highlight today in this presentation. So I threw in the highlights of some of the research that was presented in the Alzheimer in that conference. So I believe I have sharing capabilities. Great, Kelly. Yeah. So let me start by sharing my screen. And can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Well, let's begin. Again, thanks so much for having me. And as Kelly mentioned, my name is Harold Morales. I am the Community Program Specialist, DE&I with the Alzheimer's Association, and I've been on this role for just a little over a year. Um, and has a part of the DE&I. I'm especially focusing in outreaching to those disproportionately affected groups, being Latinos, Black Americans, Native Americans, and women, to just name a few. So today I'm hoping to highlight just some of the general basic facts and figures about Alzheimer's and dementia, really focus on the importance of early detections and diagnosis, especially when we're talking about the new treatment that's happening with Alzheimer's disease, and talk about some of the risk reductions as well, and ways that you can get involved in some with the Alzheimer's Association, or some of the initiatives that we have available for community members, for the community at large. Some of you may already know this, but often one of the main questions that we get is what's the difference between this dementia and Alzheimer's are. So dementia is really a collection of symptoms related to cognitive decline, that is changes in reasoning, thinking, and memory. But it also includes other symptoms that involves behavioral and psychological symptoms such as depression, agitation, aggression. Um, Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia. As you can see, we like to think about it as an umbrella term, and under that umbrella, there's different types of dementia, Alzheimer's being the number one cause, followed by vascular dementia, Lewy body, and frontotemporal. There are also, what I would like to mostly highlight in this slide is that not everyone with cognitive decline has dementia. So there are some causes that could be unrelated to dementia. For example, depression, certain interactions with medications, infections, and even some Lyme disease. Those could mimic some of the symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia. So it's really important to know what the root cause is, and go to the doctor early, get diagnosed, because some of these causes could not be dementia related at all and could be reversible. Alzheimer's disease has three main characteristics, or three hallmarks. These are brain changes that are happening in form, and we see that plaques are being proteins are being formed in the brain that interfere with cell communications. That is plaques in the form of beta amyloids, and also proteins that form tangles, or tau tangles, in the brain. Those two are believed to be associated with brain cell death or neurodegeneration. As you can see on the slide, there's a healthy brain to the left, and an Alzheimer's brain on the right, where you can see how much mass the brain has lost. We often see that some of the first changes in the brain are in the areas of thinking and memory and language. And that is why the Alzheimer's Association has created a list of 10 warning signs to help people navigate and know what's happening, to be aware of any changes that are happening in the brain. Um, this is not to be used as a diagnosis, but more of a tool just to bring awareness and to be cautious of any changes, and go again, seek diagnosis, seek medical help, and get an early diagnosis. As some of you may be aware of, whether you had a loved one or family member with the disease. Some of the most typical changes we often see are in the areas of thinking, language, and memory. So often the recent, like, short-term memory is the one that is affected first. Of course, not these signs don't follow, are not in a specific order, and we also have, with each specific sign, we also have something that's typical to the age-related process. I will not go over any of those signs, but we do have a education series that talks specifically about these 10 warning signs. So I would like to encourage you, if you notice any of these signs among yourself, or within you, or any family members, or anyone that you know, to please seek help or attention. We have a 1-800 helpline that's really great, and you can call it at any time. It's available 24/7, and they're able to guide you through any questions that you may have. And that's 1-800-272-3900. So we know that Alzheimer's disease is a disease that takes time to develop. It takes between 15 to 20 years before any of the symptoms appear. We know those hallmark changes may already be happening in the brain before any of the signs appear. And that's why we call Alzheimer's disease as a disease that happens at a continuum. There's three phases of the disease. So everyone begins asymptomatic, as I just mentioned, like no symptoms, um, no symptoms, and those symptoms could be developing again between 15 to 20 years earlier. That's the first phase. The second phase is MCI, or mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's disease. And we say due to Alzheimer's disease because, again, it's important to mention that not everyone with mild cognitive impairment will go on to develop Alzheimer's disease. As I mentioned, there are some cases that could be, it could be a different type of dementia, for example, vascular or frontotemporal, or it could be something completely unrelated, as I mentioned, some other interaction with a medication, an infection, or a thyroid disease, for example. So, so, um, so in this case, we know that mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's disease because the hallmark changes are present in the brain. The third stage is dementia due to Alzheimer's disease, and this one is to be broken down into mild, moderate, and severe, where the symptoms are increasing in severity or progressing according to the stage that the disease is developing, all the way where the person will require 24/7 care from someone. So we know Alzheimer's disease is very prominent. There are about 7 million Americans living with the disease in the country, and this is expected to double by the year 2050. It affects women more so than men. It kills, it's a very deadly disease. It kills 1 in 3 seniors. Killing more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. In fact, the deaths of Alzheimer's have actually increased 141% compared to other deaths by heart disease, for example, that actually have gone down. It is also a very costly disease. There are about 11 million Americans providing care, unpaid care to someone with the disease. That has been calculated to be about 18 billion hours a year, value at $347 billion a year that goes unpaid. So it's very costly disease. It affects many people, but it also affects different populations more disproportionately than others. So we know that women are disproportionately affected by the disease. There are also women are also the ones that take care more, that provide more care to someone with the disease. Um, Black Americans and Hispanics are also disproportionately affected. Black Americans are twice as likely to have Alzheimer's disease compared to the white populations, and Latinos are 1.5 times as likely to have Alzheimer's compared to the white population. We know that among some of these groups, genetics does not seem to be or to account for the larger difference in prevalence in the disease, but it has to do more with the quality of care, some social factors, and social determinants of health that play a bigger role when it comes to some of these groups. And we also know that the groups that are disproportionately affected are also underrepresented in clinical trials. And that's really important because um, Latinos make 19% of the US population and only 1% of them participate in clinical trials. Similarly, Black Americans are 12% of the population and only 5% of Black Americans participate in clinical trials. This is important because the lack of participation in trials limits the knowledge of the disease. It also limits the effectiveness of the medication that is being available, that becomes available as research develops. So this is really limiting the treatment to those populations. So it's really important to encourage uh, under those underrepresented groups to participate in clinical trials and bring awareness and knowledge of the disease so that they feel more comfortable participating. It has been there's some research that points out that these groups are really likely to participate in clinical trials if given the opportunity and given the right information and knowledge. So we don't know why Alzheimer's disease happens, but we're learning more and more as to what the risk factors are for the disease. So we have two categories of risk factor. We have the non-modifiable risk factor, which are age, genetics, race, ethnicity, sex, and gender. Age being the number one risk factor. So we know the majority of cases are between 65 and older. And this risk doubles every 5 years after the age of 65. Um, Genetics, if you have a relative, first degree relative that has had the disease, it puts a person at a greater risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. And as I just mentioned, there's certain groups that are disproportionately affected or are at greater risk, and females compared to males are also at higher risk. Then we have the modifiable risk factors. This is really great because these are the risk factors that we're able to modify and are able to do something to able to modify them by through changes in lifestyle. So among those, we have substance use such as alcohol and smoking. That we know that the level of education is really important. The more years of education that person has had, the more protective the brain is against dementia and Alzheimer's. But we also know that not just a level of education, but if a person also engages in or has a job that's really engaging and demanding on the brain, that's also just equally as effective as obtaining a higher degree. Some other important modifiable risk factors are traumatic brain injuries are really important, and cardiovascular disease. So all the chronic health diseases, such as like diabetes and hypertension, are really important on the role they play on Alzheimer's and dementia. Equally, I would like to mention that the social engagement, the interaction, the connectivity, we're learning more about how important it is. We know that isolation plays a huge role, especially in the older population, that so much that it has been equivalent to someone that's socially isolated has been said that there is equivalent for that person to be smoking 15 packs of cigarettes a day, just how much social isolation plays a role. So one of the beginning with the some of the highlights from the conference that we learned, the last commission report. It's a report that puts out a list of factors that could be modified. And this year, during the conference, they added two new risk factors to the list of 12, so bringing that to 14. And these are risk factors that could potentially reduce the prevalence of dementia if they're modified. The new ones that they added this year is the untreated vision loss and the impacts of high cholesterol, LDL, especially during the midlife years of the person. So those two were risk factors that were added to the list of 14. We know that previously that up to 40% of the dementia cases, now 45% of dementia cases with the new addition could be delayed if those 14 modified risk factors are targeted. So changing behaviors, adapting healthy habits, lowering the risk, it's really important. So up to 45% of the cases of dementia could potentially be delayed if we act on those modifiable risk factor. I'll just like to highlight some of the ones that also have a lot more substantial supportive evidence, such as I just mentioned cardiovascular health, how important it is, the education attainment, social connectivity, and dramatic brain injuries. We also learned from research presented in the conference that how much our diet impacts our brain. It was Researchers pointed out that having at least 2 servings a week of processed red meats is associated with a 14% higher increase of dementia. So that just highlights how important it is to maintain a healthy lifestyle, a healthy diet. We learned that of the impact of wildfire smoke, of those air contaminants, how much it's affecting the brain health. So we previously knew that this played a role, but with other larger studies that were recently conducted and the research was presented in the during the conference, it solidified the risk or levels of wildfires in the brain. And this is especially important as we know, there's every year wildfires are increasing. There are currently several huge fires burning in California at the moment, so that it just has a tremendous impact on the health of everyone, and not everyone thinks about it, especially impacting the brain. So it's really important to bring awareness of those new findings from the research. So moving on to talking more about what the benefits are of early diagnosis. There are a lot of benefits. There are some medical benefits as to why the person should be diagnosed early. It gives early diagnosis will bring access to current treatments that are available, perhaps the opportunity to participate in clinical trials, and the opportunities to just prioritize health and make those lifestyle changes early. It also has the ability to plan for the future, talked about relative with the family members as who's going to take care of us, how we're going to pay for treatment or for care. And it has tremendous just benefits overall. And it's think especially in the opportunity to being able to participate in clinical trials and have the opportunity to have access to medication that otherwise will not be available. Alzheimer's disease is not diagnosed. There's not a single test to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. Rather, a primary care physician or specialist will use a combination of several different tests to diagnose Alzheimer's disease, a combination of medical history, talking to family members, interviewing family members, which are often the first ones to notice any changes. There's also a series of cognitive tests or functional assessments done, including neurological exams. But it's also they also rely on the use of biomarkers. So we're all familiar with what biomarkers are. Those are the ones tests the doctors performs when we go to the doctor and check our cholesterol level or sugar levels to see if we're at risk for diabetes or we have the disease. So those are the type of biomarkers. Those are biomarkers. And in Alzheimer's disease, they specifically use 2 types of biomarkers, which are the gold standards, and that is cerebrospinal fluids and PET scans. And those two are looking for those hallmark changes, those proteins, the beta amyloid plaques that are forming in the brain to determine whether it is Alzheimer's disease, rule out if it's another type of dementia. So that's how the biomarkers are used. They're also used to have a more accurate diagnosis to see if the person will be eligible for clinical trials, what the prognosis or the process of the disease or the progression of the disease is, and to really look at the side effects of treatment, especially the new treatment that's coming out in the new era of treatment that we are living through, which I will speak to in the later slides. So there's a lot of advances, a lot of research happening when it comes to biomarker. As I mentioned, the gold standards are PET scans and cerebrospinal fluid, but there are also a lot of new emerging biomarkers such as skin tests, the cell testing the cells of the skin and saliva to determine any early biological changes, and likewise just looking at retinal scans to determine if there are any changes in the brain. So those are just an example of emerging biomarkers. But there's where most of the work is being done as well. There are a lot of focus being done in emerging biomarkers are in blood tests. So blood biomarkers. And this is really important because eventually what we want to, the goal is to provide everyone with a low cost test, non-invasive test. As we know, cerebrospinal fluid is really invasive. It's taking a lump or puncture. So we are in the need for more non-invasive, accessible, and low-cost tests to determine if the person is at risk for Alzheimer's disease, and that's where the new blood tests are coming in. It was reported during the conference that some new research found actually a 90% accuracy in blood tests. They use blood biomarkers compared to 73% accuracy among specialists and 63% accuracy in physicians that were not using blood tests. So it's a 90% accuracy. It's really encouraging and really great. And we're moving towards that to the use of biomarkers to determine the risk and early diagnosis for a person. But at the moment, we're not quite there. More research is still needed. We still need a much higher accuracy in those blood tests, and we need those blood tests to be FDA approved before they can be widely used and recommended for diagnosis. So speaking of the treatment for Alzheimer's disease, since the disease was first diagnosed in 1906, we did not, it was until 90 years later that we had the new medication that came out. And medication in Alzheimer's could be broken down into two groups: the ones that treat the symptoms of the disease, and the ones that a new group that slows the progression of the disease. So, as you can see, most of the medication available are those that treat the symptoms of the disease. The first one, as I mentioned, came out in 1996, 90 years later after the disease was first diagnosed. And since then, we have seen a quite rapid movement of new medication coming out. The latest of the new medications that treats the symptoms is that one for agitation in 2023. We are currently on what we call the new era of treatment, and that is those medications that treat or that slow the progression of the disease. As we know, there's the first one in this group came out in 2021. That was Aduhelm. Since the beginning of the year of this year, the manufacturer actually announced that they will be discontinuing this medication. But this Aduhelm has really been the stepping stone, the cornerstone for the next drugs, the next medications that follow in 2023, like Leqembi, and the beginning of July of this year in 2024, Kinzula was FDA approved. So these medications are really important because it targets the underlying biology of the disease. If it is an infusion treatment that removes the amyloid plaques from the brain, and therefore it slows the progression of the disease significantly. There are also a lot of different medications, about 140 different trials or different clinical trials that are targeting multiple aspects of the biology of the disease. There are researchers are looking into tau tangles, neuroinflammation, cell communications, oxidative stress, to name a few. Um, Something really important is to mention is that about close to 30% or about 28% of the medications that are being researched are medications that are repurposed from other diseases. Um, in from other diseases. And one example you might have heard in the news that it's about the impact that medication has had for uh, obesity and weight loss medication, specifically those that are similar to Ozempic in type 2 diabetes. So the impact that that medication has had in Alzheimer's and dementia. So it was reported on a small trial that about 50% of dementia could potentially be reduced through some of those drugs that are targets towards obesity and weight loss. So a lot more research needs to be done, but this is really great because there are investigating other, as mentioned, other medications that treat other diseases. And eventually the goal is that that Alzheimer's disease will be treated just as we treat cancer with a combination of treatments and different approaches. So the Alzheimer's Association is the largest nonprofit of research. There are currently about 405 million dollars in active grants. That is about 1,100 projects in 56 countries. So there's a lot of research, a lot of exciting research happening, not just in the U.S., but all over the world internationally. Um, since the beginning of the passage of the Alzheimer's Accountability Act in 2014, the NIH has actually allocated a lot of funding, and up to date, this funding has actually increased sevenfold. Now we have more than $3.8 billion being allocated to research worldwide. So the funding is at all times high, and the Alzheimer's Association is very involved in through grants and in promoting different types of research. Just to highlight two research that are happening. Actually, the U.S. pointer is a research that just concluded enrollment, and the results for this research will be expected in the summer of 2025. US Pointer was a two-year clinical trial that looks at multiple risk factors in older adults, and that is risk factors that include physical activity, nutrition, intellectual engagement, social engagement. So it's not only looking at just the effects on drugs and medication, but we are also looking at those what are other types of risk factors, lifestyle factors. Something that's really significant about the U.S. Pointer study is that it enrolled for the first time 30% of the participants in this study are from underrepresented population. And as I mentioned earlier, this is really important because it is the underrepresented populations that want to tend not to participate in clinical trials. So this is one that has a really high percentage. It's still not high enough, but it's a great start, and it's very excited to see the results during the summer. Similarly, there's a Worldwide Fingers, which is the Alzheimer's Association's a collaborative on this research. And they're also looking at lifestyle changes when it comes to lifestyle interventions such as diets in 62 countries in the world. So it's a very interesting study, and looking forward to seeing what the results are from those two. The Alzheimer's Association is committed to providing global research through in promoting risk reduction and early detection. So we have a lot of different areas, pillars in the association. We provide care and support, advocacy, awareness, and education. And of course, as I mentioned, research. And we are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion and providing the information to those groups that are impacted disproportionately by the disease. So I encourage you to visit our website and find ways to volunteer. There are many ways to volunteer, whether you want to become an educational, a community educator, just volunteer on the walk, or which is the largest fundraiser, or other ways to volunteer, raise funds is the longest stay as well. We have a lot of research available. The 1-800 helplines being one of them, which is a 24, it's a helpline open 24/7, available in 200 languages. So this is you're calling and talking to someone, to a live person that could guide you and guide you to the right direction. And we also have a lot of research initiatives as well, ways to participate in research. KU being one of our partners, local partners. We are currently working with some researchers in the University of Kansas, and we work very closely with them. So there's a lot of ways to get involved, find research, whether we want to be part of a trial match, and just and a community resource finder as well, where you can find different type of resources that you may be looking for. And with that, thank you for your attention. And if there are any questions, I can answer them.
Great. Harold, thank you so much. There was a question from someone in the chat about um, this is a mouthful of a drug, tririzolol. I don't know if I, tririzol, I can't say it. Troriluzole, maybe, as a treatment for mild cognitive impairment. Do you recall any discussion about that at the conference, or do you have any information about that?
Sure, really. So I do not, but as I mentioned, there was so much information. There's a huge conference, so I only had to like hand pick like where I could attend. I'm sure there was probably something that was done. I'm making a note and see if I could find information. Is that is the information available of the person that asked a question so I can get back to them?
How about this, Harold? If you find anything and send it to me, I think we've got the questioner's
Sure.
contact information in our system. So yeah, I can follow up with that. If you find anything out, I'll be happy to be the middle person.
Okay, perfect.
Um, And then there are a few other questions I think I was able to grab about some resources. There was also a program earlier this year, January, about the blood-brain barrier,
Mhm.
and a medication that may potentially be able to cross the barrier. I have told the person who asked about that that I'm willing to look into it and see if maybe we can do a webinar about it upcoming.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember there were a lot of research being done as to more effective way of reaching the blood barrier, so the amyloid drugs, the anti-amyloid drugs, for example, could more effectively go into the brain. And there were experiment or doing research with some sort of ultrasound that will be able to more effectively bring the medication into the blood, into the brain. So yeah, there's research going on in regards to that.
good. Thank you. Somewhere in the chat, I've got a link to the AAIC website, everyone. And there's some good information about highlights from this year's conference. So I suggest you take a look at that. I'll copy it back into the chat again so it can be the most recent conversation. Harold, thank you so much for sharing your experience in Philadelphia. I'm glad you got to go. I think, did I hear correctly? Next year is in Toronto.
In Toronto. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to go next year, but my fingers crossed. Maybe something will happen.
Maybe so. We'll cross our
Yeah.
fingers. And we'll stay tuned because I'm sure they'll be happy to share the information. I have to say, hearing about the wildfires is just wild. I had no idea about that. I Googled while you were presenting, Harold, and found a link to some information about the wildfires. And as a fellow Californian, I certainly have empathy for our friends in California that have to deal with that on a regular basis.
Yeah, and as we know, like that, those contaminants travel, so they don't stay in that area. So I think we got last year or 2 years ago, we got smoke from Canada
Ugh,
wildfire for Canadian wildfires. So
I
yeah, so
didn't remember that.
we're
Yeah,
definitely not isolated when it comes to those like environmental contaminants.
you got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, my goodness, once again, we are over time because so much good information. Thank you, Harold. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Um, I will follow up with those questions that folks asked about potential future topics, including that drug whose name I won't try to say again. And the blood-brain barrier, and anything else that you might need to know. Next week's webinar will be about a new program that we have available in Kansas City. Other parts of Kansas have had it for a while. It's called PACE, and PACE stands for Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. And it's a Medicare program specifically with support for folks experiencing cognitive change, diagnosis of Alzheimer's and other dementias. I've known about it for a while. It's finally available in Kansas City, Missouri. It's been available in Topeka and some other parts of Kansas for a while. Wherever you live, I think you'll find it useful to know what PACE is doing. So join us next Thursday, the 19th already, wow, of September. And Monica Hudson from the PACE office in Kansas City, Missouri will join us. And we'll have information about that in the Monday issue of My Alliance. Harold, many, many thanks to you again. Appreciate everything you all are doing at the association.
Of
Everybody
course.
have a great, great week, and we'll see you next
Real
time. Oh,
Real quick,
Thank
real
you.
quick, real quick. I just wanted to say that the KU ADRC will have a table and a space at the Alzheimer's Association walk. So Harold mentioned the walk, so definitely come out. It'll be at the World War One Liberty Museum. We'll be there. Come by and see us, and be sure to participate. And Kelly will be sending out information about that to all of our My Alliance network. So be on the lookout. We'll be there, and you'll get to see Harold too, I'm sure. So thanks
Yes, I
again,
will be
Harold.
there. Thank
excellent.
you.
Thank you, Tina and everyone. There's a couple of new things in the chat that I'll check before I sign off. Looks like people are saying thank you. You're welcome. And Cheryl reminded me, Cheryl says she'll share the video. It will be available. I'm going to use the library's Wi-Fi and see if I can't upload it before I leave Topeka today. Okay. All right, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much.